I can't believe I get to say something like this, but this channel is partnered with Dubby, the clean energy drink that is made to give you focus but no crash. It's gluten-free and with zero sugar, and has a good variety of unique flavors. Dubby, in my opinion, is the product you need to keep yourself focused and energized while getting your game on throughout the day. If you use my promo code MistressDove, that's in all caps, you can get 10% off of your next order. And by the way, every purchase made using my code earns me a little something for my wallet, so not only are you helping yourself with some tasty and energizing drinks, but you're also helping me and the channel, and I need the help. The link to Dubby's website where you can buy some of it is in the description below. So, I imagine after seeing this video's title and the thumbnail, and now looking at the gameplay behind me, you're probably wondering what the actual hell am I talking about. Okay, so I would like to present to you all Little Red Riding Hood's Zombie BBQ for the Nintendo DS. Don't bring it down! Developed by the companies Enjoy Up and Gamic Entertainment, which are two companies I literally know nothing about, and neither of which have proper Wikipedia pages. I did do some Googling on my own once Wikipedia failed me, and found some stuff out about Gamic, so thanks to Giant Bomb, I can list off some games that they developed. So let's see, we have, my notes, Family and Friends Party, which was a WiiWare shovelware party game. And that probably doesn't make this look good. Oh, okay. Not a winner, but what about Animal Boxing, which was also a DS game? And while trying to find anything on this game at all, I discovered it actually has a fan club on DeviantArt. Not surprising, but you can take that as you will. There's also Elite Forces Unit 77, which is another DS game, but like Animal Boxing, I basically know nothing about it and couldn't find anything about it. And unlike Animal Boxing, there isn't a DeviantArt group dedicated to it. Now, Zombie BBQ was released in North America in 2008, and over here it was published by a third company named Destineer, who seemed to exist strictly as a publishing company. They published various other games like Kate West The Vanishing Files, as well as publishing two different Fullmetal Alchemist games on the DS system. Destineer quietly shut down in 2011, but they're the only company of the three involved that even has a Wikipedia page, so I think they won out of the three. So Little Red Riding Hood's Zombie BBQ, which for the sake of brevity, I'm just gonna call Zombie BBQ, because you know, I'm a big fan of brevity if you couldn't tell, takes place in a world called Storyland, which is a world where fairy tale characters exist, such as our main protagonist, the titular Little Red Riding Hood, who herself is a fine, gun-loving young lady who is no longer anywhere near as little as she was originally depicted. And our other hero is Momotaro, not the one from Dawn Brothers. Instead, the one from the Japanese folktale of the Peach Boy, which was the thematic basis for Dawn Brothers. Instead of guns, he uses shurikens and ninja stars. And he's also gone on many adventures before this where he's fought against the forces in the underworld, which, in my opinion, makes him the perfect choice for Red's partner in this game. Helps that their designs perfectly contrast each other, with Red's design being primarily red and curvy, whereas Momotaro's design is primarily blue and muscular. The plot setup is told with an intro sequence set to a song that reminds me way too much If You're Afraid by Rammstein. I'd play a comparison, but that's a terrible idea given YouTube being, well, you know. So you're gonna have to trust me on that one. The intro also tells us a bit more about the lore of this world. Red was an adult during the events of her original fairy tale, but her original fairy tale in this universe was instead her saving her grandmother from the big bad wolf and his army of evil, which is very far removed from her original story. Get used to that sentence. The woodsman is dead as of the current day, and now Red's up against a seemingly never-ending army of the undead, with only her new friend Momotaro, who, for some reason, the game keeps putting a space between his name, you know, between the Momo and Taro parts, when that's just one word. It's one singular name, it's not two. Whatever. There are little cutscenes with the characters between levels, showing Red and Momotaro interacting and explaining the location changes for each stage, with details of how the two are traveling around Storyland to try and find a solution to this shared problem of theirs, as well as find the source of why it's all going down in the first place. In the end, as we fade into the night, after traveling across the land and fighting various threats, the two come face to face with a big bad wolf, who is called Lobocop in this game, which is a quirky way to reference his Eggman-style robotification, and call to mind the iconic Mortal Kombat 11 character Robocop. Once he's defeated in an epic showdown, the two go their separate ways, with both now on a new mission to revert everyone's zombification and return everything to normal, because apparently in this game, zombieism is a curable affliction, which is very much not accurate at all to real life. I've talked about this with Barbara. You cannot cure zombification. Apparently, zombies are actually just separate souls from the original person. Apparently, after you die, your soul leaves your body, and there's a 50-50 chance your body will come back as a zombie. And then that zombie has a 50-50 chance of either having a consciousness, like Barbara does, or just being a ghoul. What? I'm allowed to ask. I've been in this dimension long enough that I need to start knowing these things. Anyway, back on the point, Red goes back home after the adventure's over to check on her grandmother, whose zombie self was the first boss, by the way. Meanwhile, Momotaro's headed back to Japan, specifically Tokyo according to himself, to help his country recover from the zombie uprising that took over the world. They split off after telling each other their plans, and the game ends with a screen that lasts a bit too long, that just states that the game now has a happy ending, and then boom, credits. I won't lie to you, the ending cutscene is a little underwhelming, especially when compared to the opening cutscene that plays every single time you boot up the game. But the game's not super story heavy anyway, so I'm not too surprised. There is a story, but most of it is confined to Red and Momotaro interacting, making them the strongest characters in this game by far. Which isn't saying much, but again, not a story-focused or story-heavy game, and I like their interactions enough. There's this weird instance near the end of the game where Momotaro calls Red babe out of nowhere, which threw me off because it felt really out of character for him, since up until that point, his vibes were just simply the respectable shonen protagonist who gets no bitches until the time skip, and he didn't really radiate womanizing stud who'd conquer the moon energy. It's not the only instance where there's a writing inconsistency with characterization. Right after the first boss, Red lets out a random Emily-esque like in the middle of a sentence, when she doesn't speak like a bimbo at any other point in the game. You know, there's just little writing inconsistencies like that bug the hell out of me because I'm kind of a stickler for specifics. But I'm pretty sure they're the product of translation, given the developers are Spanish. But that's an assumption because, again, there's like no information on this game online, so I'm kind of just trying to swim up a waterfall here. Also, gonna put this out there now, the barbecue in this title is not literal. You aren't having a lovely cookout with Red and Momotaro cooking all the delicious meats I could ask. It's figurative, with the idea being that the quote-unquote barbecue is our very attractive heroes mowing down walking corpses in a blaze of destructive glory. Which is kinda horrifying, personally speaking, since, you know, I'm friends with a zombie and everything. I don't know, just kinda awkward and gross, but I shouldn't think about it too much. I really dig the character art in this game. You've probably taken one look at Red here and thought, my, what big breasts you have! Which I'm certain is not the first time you've thought that while watching a video here on the Mistress Dove channel, considering Mistress and Emily are, well, they're Mistress and Emily. I tried to find out who drew all this art and did these designs because I'm loving this game's style. Red's super sexy and cute while also being really badass, and Momotaro's got this strong, well-meaning shonen protagonist vibe to him that I am just a sucker for. The game has a very anime-inspired, twisted fairy tale combination art style. It's in that very specific niche of stuff like Alice Madness, Soul Eater, and even Darkstalkers to a point. Hell, Darkstalkers has its own gun-obsessed version of Red Riding Hood too, with BB Hood. But you know the niche I'm talking about, right? That twisted fairy tale type of thing where a story or work takes classic folklore or bedtime stories then twists them in new ways. Hell, Ruby's kind of a light variation of that. In general, I think the game's got a strong identity in the art department, even if it feels a little low budget in other places, specifically in the menus and in the 3D assets. It does feel like a DSiWare game, even though it did get an actual physical release. Now, I'm not suggesting you buy that physical release, considering, yeah, these eBay listings, they should tell you all exactly why I don't own a physical copy at the moment. Though I wouldn't be against it if I ever become like a character in Yakuza 0 and just become utterly drowned in cash. Apparently, when the game first released physically, it released at $20, which I believe is a fair price point for the game. But now? Yeah, nah, this channel does not rake in the views needed to justify me paying those prices. So now you're probably thinking, well, lady, that's all nice and good, but what kind of game is this anyway? Well, person I just made up who hasn't been watching the video and apparently has it closed in another tab. It's a vertical-based rail shooter where your character of choice is at the bottom of the screen and everything else is above you. You could see that on screen if you were watching the video. Anyway, your character will move forward by their own accord, and you can only really control their left and right movements either with the D-pad, the buttons if you're left-handed, which is a nice feature even though I'm not left-handed, or the stylus, which is how you control everything else. And yes, I do mean literally how you control everything else. You use the stylus to fire your weapons, swiping in the direction you want to fire. You use the stylus to throw bombs by tapping on the screen where you want to throw the bomb. You use the stylus to crouch, which is a move you'll want to use not just for the upskirt it gives you when you're playing red, but also to avoid some oncoming attacks. You use the stylus to shake off the zombies that get close to you and latch on. Fuck, you use the stylus to navigate the menus, and I'm pretty sure you'd use the stylus to wipe your ass if the game would allow it. Personally, despite the tone, I actually love this concept. I'm honestly a big fan of DS games that utilize the stylus as its primary control method. My favorite DS game is The World Ends With You, which is controlled 100% with the stylus, and I consider that the best game on that platform. Other top-tier DS games like Ghost Trick, which is getting a Steam port and you should all buy it when that comes out, also primarily use the stylus. But I don't think Zombie BBQ quite sticks to landing control-wise. The biggest thing for me is Zombie BBQ's touch controls feel inconsistent. Like very inconsistent, which is kind of a problem when it's in the context of a fast-paced rail shooter that has a tendency to group up several waves of enemies at you all at once. If you play this on a 3DS and decide not to use a stylus to move, then I implore you to use the fucking circle pad instead of the D-pad. Trying to use the 3DS's D-pad while playing this legit cramped my hand at one point because of the positioning. Oh yeah, I should mention I played the game on my 3DS and not on a standard DS, but I don't think that actually matters, but now you know for prosperity. It's also why the footage on screen is taken off YouTube because I don't have a 3DS capture card, and those aren't exactly easy to get nowadays. Again, I don't get the views necessary to justify those prices. Like I mentioned earlier, this is a rail shooter, so you'll be doing a lot of shooting, obviously. I mentioned earlier that Red is a gun nut while Momotaro uses shurikens, which is true. Their default weapons are a basic machine gun for Red and fairly standard ninja stars for Momotaro, but their additional arms seem to be all the same. Those additional arms being a shotgun, a flamethrower, a rocket launcher, and a laser, which are unique arms you can find on the map during a level, usually by destroying a crate or by shooting the cat when it appears on screen. What? Oh, you want me to explain the cat thing? Okay, fine, you know, why not? So during levels, a cat will walk by chasing something. I'm not entirely sure what it was, but you can shoot down both and one will drop one of the additional weapons and the other will drop a jar of what looks to be strawberry jam to me, which is funny since it's supposed to be a health pickup. And trust me, you're gonna be thankful health pickups exist since these jars are the only way to heal during a level. Yeah, this is something I wasn't expecting jumping in, but this game's kind of intense and it gets pretty hard past the first set of levels. Each stage is made up of about 3 levels for reference, and after the first boss, I noticed an instant spike in difficulty. I stuck with Red for basically my entire playthrough, but I did give Momotaro some time too, and while he plays almost exactly the same, I felt like his default attack, i.e. those shurikens I mentioned earlier, did way less damage than Red's assault rifle, which might be a balancing measure since he can fire more of those in one swoop than Red can fire bullets before she has to reload. Part of the game's difficulty for me came down to the fact that with how much was going on, I'd occasionally lose track of either where I was standing or what the enemies were doing, because the game is split between 2 screens, and there are quite a few instances where a lot is going on at once, so keep that in mind if you're interested. You gotta be on guard at all times and stay alert. This issue is only made worse by the previously mentioned inconsistent response time from the touch controls. Bosses in this game are well thought out and feel unique from one another. Each get taken down in the same way of just barging in and blasting like Frank Reynolds. But the challenge comes from learning attack patterns, reacting accordingly, and making sure you don't get wasted by whatever corrupt fairy tale character you're currently fighting against. The first boss to really wreck my shit was the first Pinocchio fight in level 1 of stage 3, with a big hurdle being it took me quite a bit to truly understand his attack patterns, so I ended up taking a lot of damage that I didn't need to. In general, I'd say the bosses are fair in their challenge, though a part of me does wish that we could at least buy health items to use during battle or something. At least on the standard normal difficulty, you know, to make the game a bit more forgiving, but I get the feeling forgiving isn't the game's MO since the lowest difficulty is normal, there is no option for an easy mode, and the other 2 difficulties are hard and the unlockable extreme. Oh wait, sorry. extreme! So this tells me the game's main focus is providing a challenging rail shooting experience like one would find in an arcade, but in your hands, on the DS. Which is a valid approach. After all, not every game needs to have an easy mode. It's just worth pointing that out to you all, since it means if you're someone who needs or wants something like that, you might want to look elsewhere. Other bosses like Granny, the first boss, are fairly easy and straightforward. I feel like the easiest boss was Kangrina, i.e. the first pig boss. A fight that can be made even easier if you walk in with the right stuff in your hand, like bombs, and especially the laser, which just eats at this dude's health bar. Bosses like Gullimore and the second Pinocchio fight actually have a few moves that can only be avoided with the duck move, which does make them harder given the finicky finicky touch controls, but I like the idea of them actually asking more of the player besides move and shoot. Mr. Bacon really threw me off because the dude has a second phase, which was not the norm before that fight at all. It was a cool moment, but admittedly also a little annoying due to how brutal I found the bosses to be. Also, Mr. Bacon has a third phase. Shit. This dude just does not fucking let up. This is the boss where the thought about having healing items first occurred to me. Either as something you can carry and use whenever, or at least having the ones already present in the game appear via the cat and fish mentioned earlier during bosses would be nice. These bosses are 100% an endurance test sometimes, and that's why I felt so certain earlier when I said that I think the game's main goal was to be a difficult game. Don't misunderstand. I'm not saying the game's worse for not having more healing items, and I'm certainly not saying it should be easier. That would be preposterous. And I think I made my position more than clear earlier. I just think the habit of bosses being pretty ball-busting combined with the less than reliable touch controls makes it sometimes more frustrating than they want it to be. Like if the controls were more responsive, then this wouldn't be a complaint at all. Frustration does not equal challenging. Games like Super Meat Boy or Katana Zero can be challenging, but no death in those games ever feels like the fault of the game or its design. Instead, feeling like an error of performance on the player, which leads to the player improving and learning, which is good. That's good design. Bosses definitely are better than the levels themselves. Now, this isn't to say the levels are bad per se, but they lack variety, with most of them amounting to massive zombie crowds charging you, but there are some levels that shake it up a little. There are some enemies that use weapons that you gotta duck to avoid. The ducking is surprisingly a mechanic the game requires you to use quite a bit, which is pretty cool to me, because I like when a game gives you situations in which to utilize all your mechanics. Another issue I have with levels is, honestly, they're boring. It always amounts to a hallway that Red or Momotaro is just going for a walk, abridged a la carte style, automatically on, while all you do is fire your guns, weave and dodge left and right, occasionally duck, and then fire your guns some more, all the while. These hallways are structured the same across the whole game, with almost no real variety. The only differences between levels being what theme they have. And while that's not exactly a bad thing considering the game's automated nature, it doesn't stop its levels from being bland and dull and feeling pretty repetitive. None of which makes sense for a game with this as a title and these as its main characters, and it causes the regular levels to blend together for me in my head. And since a lot of the game is these levels, that feels like a fair thing for me to complain about and criticize. Speaking of things I don't like in this game, remember that ending I mentioned earlier in the video? Well, if you beat the game on normal, the game will end after you beat Zombiezilla, who is the boss at the end of Stage 7 before the actual final boss. The only way to see the real ending and fight the true final boss, i.e. Lobocop, who I mentioned earlier, is to play the game on hard. I know some people like this trope for some reason. I'll never understand it personally, but I just think it's irritating, especially since the game never told me I was going to be punished for playing it on normal, which, you know, is probably going to be what many people go to when they first play as well. And since the game's already pretty tough on normal, hard's gotta be a real fucking pain. I was gonna play the game on hard too, but
balls to that!
I realized very quickly that'd take a bit. I know the how long to beat entry says this game's average runtime is 3 hours, but I have no clue how it's like that. I mean, I guess theoretically if you're really good at the game and never get damaged ever, you could beat it in that time. But I don't have the patience to do a whole other playthrough of this janky-ass DS game just so I can fight one more boss and see an ending that I can just look up instead. I have to be honest, if it wasn't for this game's strange state of being, I genuinely don't think I would have had the patience to deal with all this unpolished frustration, personally. From its eye-catching character designs to its fairly absurd premise, the game is just oozing a strange niche charm that makes it seem like it's just begging for a random YouTube gamer to make a video on it. I mean, after all, this is a game where a gun-toting, grown-up-as-fuck Red Riding Hood teams up with a beefcake Momotaro to gun down and fight against hordes and hordes of mindless undead, as well as zombified fairy tale creatures, which does include a zombified Santa Claus, a clear parody of Godzilla in the form of Zombiezilla, and all of this culminates in our heroes fighting against what I can only describe as a cyborg zombie big bad wolf who's the cause of all this insane chaos in the first place. I'd love to say more, but there isn't much more for me to say. It's a fairly simple rail shooter on the DS that at least lives up to its original $20 asking price and content, but fuck, I don't know. I don't know if it costs more or less on DSiWare, but still, it's a ball-bustingly difficult rail shooter with a lot of rough spots, so it's not exactly a must-play, but it's a game at least worth knowing exists, and considering how forgotten it is, I'm at least glad to make it even just a little more remembered. You know, pretending like I'm relevant enough to even make it remembered at all. But let's not go down that rabbit hole right now, because then I'll start getting existential and start getting sad. And I mean, sure, the game isn't the best. It doesn't even come close to the DS's best titles, and it doesn't even really touch its more mid games, but it's something I'm not gonna forget for a long time. For better, and for worse. As from its attention-grabbing name, to its bountiful protagonist, to its insane world, it's a title that certainly calls my gaze. I'm not sure if anything I'm saying makes sense right now, so let me just put it out clear as day. Little Red Riding Hood's Zombie BBQ is an exceptionally rough game that's not very good in several places, but I can't help but be captivated by its strange existence. It's like Dragon Ball Evolution for me. I can recognize that it's not very good, and in general fails in a lot of places where it shouldn't, but the sheer absurd fact that it exists keeps my intrigue in spite of all of its issues. It's not a very good game in my opinion, and there isn't a lot here in retrospect. I'd honestly call it a fairly shallow indulgence at best. Plus, with the DSE shop long gone and physical prices being, again, yikes, I can't exactly in good faith ever recommend a game of this quality to any of you. Not at those prices, at least. And not when it's this. I wasn't anywhere near as in love with this game as I wanted to be going in, to tell you the truth. I want to say I'll eventually pick it up again so I can play it on hard and see that true ending for myself and all that, but I don't think I ever will. It's a game that's neat to think about, but I don't actually enjoy it at all, outside of the surface. When I originally wrote this video script, I was a little more forgiving than what you're getting right now. But sitting on this game a bit longer after the fact, it only made my opinion on it become more negative. I mean, I don't hate the game, because I don't. I still think it's a neat little game, even if it's pretty unpolished and exceptionally flawed. I'm kind of running in circles at this point, so I'll conclude by saying this. I only played this game in the first place because the name caught my attention, and the art held that attention even longer. But now, having played the game on normal, I can now say it's not a game I'm ever exactly going to be playing again. But I can't exactly say I regret playing it, even if I didn't like it all that much. Because at the end of the day, that's something about games that makes them special. They're experiences. Something you get your hands on and get to experience firsthand yourself. How vast the landscape of games is and how long they've been around. There's plenty of games you've definitely never heard of out there, just hiding from you, waiting to be found. But the thing about looking for something is that not everything you'll find is going to be a winner. But sometimes the question isn't, will it be a winner or not? Sometimes the question is, will it stick in your mind long after the experience is over? Now that's the real question. I mean, after all, it's not every day you get to play a game called Little Red Riding Hood Zombie BBQ. Wait, the fuck is that? And then I said the aristocrats.
Oh, Mistress, you do always know how to entertain.
Anything for you girls.
And I do so adore what you've done with the place.
It's all thanks to that lovely home designer you recommended. She did a marvelous job.
I still think my designer would have been just as good.
I bet Cody is real sweet, but I was looking for something more homey. And your designs have too many lava pits for my liking.
Kamek, his name isn't Cody.
Darling, it's just a joke. Oh, if it isn't my little human.
Damn, didn't know you had a daughter.
She's absolutely divine.
God, she's not my mom. No, girls, unfortunately, she's not my daughter. I told you before about my human self from another dimension, did I not?
Oh yeah, you did.
This is her? She's so different from you, so much more appetizing.
Please refrain from eating her. Yeah, I agree. Eating me is not something I approve of.
Where are my manners? Apologies.
In my defense, I wasn't gonna eat her. I was only thinking of tying her up and kidnapping her. What? It's what I do. Jeez.
You can swear here, you know.
Yeah, but I don't wanna.
I do so enjoy when we get together.
Fuck off.
See? That wasn't so hard, now was it?
I can't believe this isn't the weirdest shit I've seen in this dimension.
Here's the food you ordered, ma'am. Hello, human ma'am. How are you?
Babs, what's that?
Oh, just some barbecue.
And you cook that.
Well, yes. I'm not just a maid after all.
So it's a zombie barbecue then?
Well, I guess you could call it that. Why?
No reason, just amused.
Huh?